Okay, so now we're here at a point where we may have a $1 billion break for Power Five schools. This is all related to the House lawsuit. Now, earlier this week, read you a story. It had been reported by multiple people, including Ross Dellinger, that the idea was going to be moving forward if there was a revenue sharing plan that looks like the one that seems to be discussed right now as a potential settlement in the House case that would allow schools to pay up to around $20 million to the student athletes at their schools. And when it says up to, it's look, how much do you guys want to offer? It would be a recruiting advantage to offer obviously more money to your players. How much do you want to offer here? But one thing that had been talked about, and I'd always just assumed the back pay part of this, because there's two parts. One, it's a class action lawsuit. So there are all these student athletes that say we have lost money over the years from not getting NIL payments. You're going to need to reimburse us for that. That's the point of the class action lawsuit, right? So the class action piece of it is you're going to have to pay everybody who's a part of this complaint. There's also the we want to settle this. We want to not be vulnerable to future lawsuits and other suits that are going right now. We just want to nip this in the bud. What do you need us to do moving forward to compensate the athletes fairly under the law so that we don't have to worry about this? That's the other piece. I had always assumed that both would have to be paid by the schools, but now that may not be actually the case, because I'm going to read to you here this article that says the NCAA's national office might be footing the bill for a settlement expected to be more than $2.7 billion in the landmark House versus NCAA lawsuit and other related antitrust cases, in hopes of reshaping and stabilizing the college sports industry. This is an ESPN article, by the way. Sources told ESPN on Thursday. This is a good old Pete Thamel article. So the NCAA's national office might be footing the bill for that $2.7 billion potential settlement in the House versus NCAA lawsuit. Sources told ESPN this week that parties have proposed the NCAA's national office, rather than its individual member schools or conferences, would pay for the settlement of past damages over a period of 10 years. The NCAA payments would be paid to former college athletes who say they were illegally prevented from making money by selling the rights to their name, image, and likeness. 10-year period, $2.7 billion. That's a pretty hefty price tag for the NCAA. But honestly, like I see that and think, I mean, look, I understand there were individuals at some of these Power Five schools who were a part of being stubborn, putting their foot down and never giving in and just allowing athletes to be slowly paid over time, like work in some ways for them to be paid instead of just refusing, and the dam breaks and it gets all crazy. But the NCAA is obviously at the forefront of that. And they were the agency that really stopped that over the years and was never forward thinking about anything. And they're a huge, the main part of the reason that they're in the position that they're in. So make them foot the bill. I mean, I love it from that standpoint. I'm totally cool with it. The settlement would come with a corresponding commitment from conferences and schools to share revenues with athletes moving forward, sources said. And regardless of whether or not the schools are footing the bill for the back pay, which it appears they won't, that was always going to be the bigger piece of this, the more consequential piece of this to what's going to happen is like moving forward, how much are you going to have to pay every year? Because now the Big Ten and the SEC are going to have an extra $20 to $40 million on you if you're in the Big 12 or the ACC. That makes it a lot easier for them to be paying this money to the student athletes than you. The settlement would establish a framework for power conferences to share revenue with their athletes in the future. Sources have told ESPN that schools are anticipating a ceiling of nearly $20 million per year for athlete revenue share moving forward. That figure, so they came up with that figure from a formula that's expected to be, per sources, 22% of a revenue metric that's still being discussed, which is set up to be based on various revenue buckets. It would be up to the schools to share that much. The dollar value and timing, sources cautioned, is not set and could change due to the myriad of variables involved in the case. You love this. This is kind of covering the bases on this. We always get these sorts of notes in the stories. It's like, hey, basically the number seems to be $20 million per year, but as always, it's not finalized. Something could change, so we got to be careful and cover our butts by saying that actually it may not be that. Who knows? But $20 million per year for athlete revenue sharing moving forward. Steve Berman, who is the co-lead counsel for the plaintiffs, told ESPN he believes the House case is the difference maker after more than a decade of legal battles chipping away at NCAA rules. And I don't think you're going to find much of anybody who would disagree with that. This has long been positioned as the case that was going to be, I would say, the straw that broke the camel's back, but it feels like that's even making it seem too weak. It's a little bit more than a straw, man. Like the anvil that broke the camel's back here. Berman declined to comment on the specifics of the ongoing settlement talks, but said the plaintiff's leverage is growing as the case moves closer to trial. Quote, "Our leverage is a big cannonball rolling down a hill and picking up speed," Berman said. "The longer they wait, the more they're going to have to pay. It's that simple." So that's a confident guy. The legal counsel of the plaintiffs seems quite confident in this instance that they're going to be able to really put the hammer down on the NCAA here, and that hey, if they wait longer, that figure could grow higher than $2.7 billion as far as what they're going to have to pay. Interestingly enough, would you be shocked to find out the NCAA declined to comment for this ESPN story? Since a bunch of college sports and NCAA officials met plaintiffs' attorneys at the Hyatt Regency at the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport on April 25th, details for potentially settling the House case have begun to be distributed to campuses. So that's a part of how you know this is moving forward. Campuses are starting to get details on what this may look like so they can prepare themselves. Not that if you are a Big 12 or ACC school, there's a great way to really prepare yourself for the ramifications of what this could mean, but you do as much as you can, right? And Thamel says after interviews with more than a dozen college officials, industry sources, and lawyers this week, ESPN has learned that many crucial details for a settlement remain unsolved, but both sides are making progress toward a deal that could serve as a catalyst for the new business model of college sports. So they're working towards it. Quote, "They've got stuff on paper," said an industry source. "This is not just lawyers and commissioners meeting and having a cocktail. The snowball is moving downhill. The horizon on this is about a month. So we may have this done within a month." That's a strong statement. Like within a month, we could know the revenue sharing model is this. You are going to have to, if you want to play with the big boys, you're going to have to pay $20 million per year to your athletes or you'll be behind. That to me is the real significance of it. And yes, obviously it's great. Some of the money going to the athletes. But to me, this is where the separation would really start to become a tougher reality for everybody involved here in where Power 4 FBS athletics is going. I also laugh, when you say, hey, it's not just lawyers and commissioners meeting and having a cocktail. To me, I always thought of like, writing the agreement for the alliance on a cocktail napkin. This isn't the alliance. This is not the alliance. Like, these are serious talks, okay? We better treat this seriously. Plaintiffs in the House case argue the NCAA is breaking the law by placing restrictions on NIL. We're talking about the settlement being $2.7 billion that the NCAA would be covering here. If they were to lose the case at trial, it could owe more than $4 billion. So that is a settlement. Still a very hefty price tag, but it does beat $4 billion for all of those guys. Along with saving money, the NCAA is also motivated to settle in hopes of laying the groundwork for a system that could help them avoid future litigation. A settlement alone might not provide that protection without additional help from Congress. Yeah, that's another piece of this too. There's always been this talk of like Congress stepping in to help so that there could not be more cases on top of this, because that's the NCAA and the school's goal is like, look, this is a major pain. Let's settle. You tell us what we need to do so that we can stop having to do this and fight cases all the time. We're exhausted. You win. We're throwing our hands up. Tell us what we got to do. Let's negotiate that deal so that we can just be done with this. Earlier this month, the plaintiffs filed a motion for summary judgment, which asked the judge in the case to rule on several key arguments prior to trial. The hearing for summary judgment is scheduled for September, and a ruling in the plaintiff's favor could continue to increase their leverage in a negotiation. So I guess they don't want to get to September. We're talking about this getting done within the next month, which would be June, obviously well ahead of September, not wanting to let the plaintiffs have even more leverage if the judge were to rule on some of the key parts of the case. One outstanding issue in the potential settlement of the House case is whether a settlement would eliminate future antitrust laws against the NCAA and its schools. Industry source told ESPN, quote, "I'm very concerned about the fact that a settlement is really not a settlement. It doesn't have enough protections. If it were an all-encompassing settlement with congressional approval, I'd feel a lot better." That's why they want Congress in there. They want Congress to guarantee that they won't have to deal with anything else. College sports leaders have already been asking Congress to write a new federal law for several years that would, among other things, protect them from future litigation. We've heard about that. There have been some politicians that have talked about it. There have been some political meetings regarding this. I've always been pessimistic about that happening because, I mean, if you just look at what happens with Congress these days, they don't seem to get much of anything done, and it's hard to get them to agree on anything to like legitimately put something into place, and they've got a lot to worry about, and it's an election year. There just seems to be a lot of resistance that would make that difficult. I don't know how likely it actually is. I understand that they want it. That may be kind of an apple pie in the sky hope sort of a deal right now as to whether or not that would happen. Sources told ESPN that some school officials are hoping a House settlement could spur action on Capitol Hill. Several members of Congress who have worked on college sports related legislation in recent years declined to comment on what impact the settlement might have on the creation of a new federal law. So it doesn't seem like we're getting a ton of info there. But here's another quote from an industry source. Quote, "You can't just settle the lawsuits. You've got to be able to emerge with something in return other than the settlement. If you don't have the requisite ability to structure the future, all we're going to do is shake hands and wait 5 minutes for the next filing. You don't want to be waiting for the next lawsuit here." So there does seem to be a pretty strong thought that if you don't get anything more ironclad than just settling this with some congressional help, this really could just be something that you do on a regular basis, and you're going to keep getting sued and you're going to keep having issues. That's why they would appreciate that help. But I know it's a lot to digest. It's a lot to take in. I think to me, the key takeaways for you at this point are this is moving. They're talking about it being potentially wrapped up in a month. And as a college sports fan, I don't think you really care, to be honest, if the NCAA is going to have to pay $2.7 billion. Who cares? That's not money coming from my school. That's an entity that should be most at fault for this anyway, in the position that everybody's in. I don't care. What I care about is what does this mean for my school? And if within a month we've got a legitimate like revenue sharing agreement, that's where you'll start to see the haves and the have-nots, I think, separate a little bit more once that comes into play. And I've said it already here in this video. I've said it over and over again. I think you guys understand where I'm getting at with that. So that would be the Cliff Notes takeaway of what seems to be going on with the House case right now in college athletics. But we are in a wild time. We're in a wild time, my friends, where this is moving pretty hot and heavy, pretty hot and heavy. And we're going to have some major changes in the structure of college athletics and how things look here very, very soon.